Hi, good morning. Sarah here from Winnipeg Nutrition. So I thought today, instead of writing a blog, I would speak a blog. I want to do a little bit of teaching today on the thyroid, how it functions, where it typically malfunctions. Because as a society, there's just an epidemic of thyroid disorders today. And we've got to get it together. We've got to learn this organ. We've got to master this so that we can start to live at a better level. So let's get started. All right, so your thyroid hormone production starts in your pituitary. So your pituitary is that gland like right in the middle of your head. There's a gland right in the middle there. Your pituitary signals your thyroid, the gland right here, to produce thyroid hormone. Then your thyroid produces hormone, mainly T4. Now T4 hormone is relatively inactive in the body, but that's what the thyroid gland produces the most of. Your body then in your liver and your gut takes that T4 hormone and converts it to T3. Now T3 is the active thyroid hormone. T3 is what boosts our moods, helps us sleep, helps us lose weight. That's T3. So when the gut and the liver convert T4 into T3, T3 is down the bloodstream. Now the tissues, our cells, have to take in the T3 for it to work. So I know that's complex, but let's go through it again. Your pituitary signals your thyroid to create T4. T4 is then converted in your liver and your gut into T3. T3 enters the cell, and that's where the magic happens. So there's a few places along that kind of stream of hormone pathway that I see the most issues. And the first one starts right in that first connection between the pituitary and the thyroid. I find often people that are on antidepressants or that have been on antidepressants or who have had a history of terrible anxiety and depression, I find that their pituitary doesn't always signal their thyroid to work very well. So often we've got to go back and we've got to look at serotonin or dopamine in order to get the pituitary to tell the thyroid how to function. Keep in mind that most of those neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So often, people with a history of depression or anxiety, we've got to go back and fix their gut to get their pituitary to signal properly to their thyroid. All right, so that's the first place that I see issues. The second place is, like I said, that then your thyroid then creates T4, and your liver and your gut convert it to T3. So people with toxicity issues, people with infection in their liver, right? I find a lot of hidden Epstein-Barr, hidden strep infections, staph infections, heavy metal toxicity, just a toxic burden in their body, right? Their liver is congested. I find that those people have a really hard time converting T4 into T3. That conversion also happens in the gut, right? So if you've got IBS or Crohn's, constipation, diarrhea, if you've had an overgrowth of yeast in the past or parasites, right? I find that more and more often. And your gut's just not working well, I find that those people don't convert T4 to T3 very well, right? Your pituitary tells your thyroid, create T4. Your thyroid creates T4, and your liver and your gut convert it to T3. So if there's any digestive concerns, if there's any liver concerns, like I mentioned, a viral load, a toxic load, you will not convert T4 into T3 very well. And the third place I find the issue is, let's say your pituitary is working just fine, it tells your thyroid, create T4, right? Your thyroid creates T4, your liver and your digestive system convert it into T3, and then that T3's got to enter the cell. So that's where I find the third issue, is that a lot of people, their lab work will look totally normal. Even their free T3 looks normal, but they're so symptomatic of an underactive thyroid because the thyroid hormone, the T3, isn't actually entering the cell. So there's two main reasons that I find that thyroid hormone can be in the bloodstream, but it doesn't enter the cell. Okay, and the first one is inflammation. If the cell wall is inflamed, thyroid hormone just can't enter it, right? Instead of the cell being nice and small, the cell is totally inflamed and nothing gets in. Nothing gets out as well, but you can't get that hormone in, right? So you've got to look at inflammation. Are foods inflaming you? Are viruses inflaming you? Is there a toxic metal that's inflaming you? Are your glucose numbers, are your sugars too high, creating inflammation? Because if there's inflammation in the body, nothing will get into the cell. The second reason that I find thyroid hormone doesn't enter the cell is elevated insulin. We talk a lot about insulin resistance, and insulin resistance can create thyroid problems because insulin in the bloodstream is so high, it's just pumping out over and over and over again from the cell, so you don't get the thyroid hormone into the cell. So people that eat 6, 7, 8 times a day, right? Their glucose is high, their insulin is high, their thyroid hormone is low. Inflammation, if insulin is high, so if you've got sugar issues, type 2 diabetes, if you've been told you're insulin resistant, you're not going to get thyroid hormone into the cell. So those are the 3 kind of mechanisms of the thyroid, and those are the 3 places that I see it malfunction the most. So there's 2 things you can take home from that. Okay, number 1 is if you've had a history of any kind of depression, anxiety, digestive concerns, toxicity issues, you've got to get that fixed first. The second thing is you've got to drop your sugars or your insulin levels. When insulin is high, thyroid hormone just does not function the way it should. It doesn't enter the cell. So number 1, you've got to clean up digestive issues. You've got to clean up liver issues. And number 2, you've really got to decrease glucose and insulin to allow thyroid hormone to work. There's a number of different ways to do that, right? We love a GAPS diet around here. It really goes back and resets the whole digestive system, right? We love doing testing to figure out what kind of bacteria is in the gut or in your system, right? That's gone systemic. If there's bacteria in there, we want to help you clean that out. And we love an intermittent fasting schedule, right? When people are fasting, you're not eating, so glucose isn't rising, insulin isn't rising, so that gives thyroid hormone a chance to enter the cell again. So those are our big things. Or take a look at a GAPS diet. Think about intermittent fasting or a digestive panel to look for bacteria. So if you're curious if your thyroid's working or not, you want to test TSH, free T3, and free T4. Most people test TSH and T4, they forget about T3. So if you're interested in thyroid testing, if you're wondering if your thyroid's working or not, if any of this applies to you, do not leave the doctor's office or your nutrition office without TSH, T3, and T4. Now there's a number of other hormones that we can test along with that, but those are the 3 main ones. Reverse T3 and antibodies, thyroid antibodies would be another recommendation. But those are the big ones. So if you're curious, grab a test. We're happy to help you figure things out. If not, I've given you some resources today to take a look through, do a little bit of research on, but hopefully I've given you a better understanding how your thyroid works and a few places to start if you think yours is malfunctioning. If you've got any other questions, let us know. We're happy to help.